Home 2022. I'm Stephanie Garrett Stearns, Vice President of Communications and Fund Development at the Community Builders. We are so happy to have you joining us live today from across the cities where we work: Baltimore, Cleveland, Chicago, DC, Durham, New York, Pittsburgh, Richmond, and right here in Boston, just to name a few. Power of Home is the Community Builders' annual event to support community life initiatives that make affordable housing places where people can thrive. We're thrilled to have Julián Castro with us live today, and we'll also hear from Carolyn, one of the many TCB residents making their dreams a reality with TCB. Power of Home makes these initiatives possible thanks to donations from individuals like you. I invite you to take a moment now and make a gift to community life. It's easy. Just take out your cell phone and point the camera to the QR code on your screen, or click the link that's in the chat. It only takes a minute, so please don't wait. Thank you for making a donation to TCB Community Life. To all of our sponsors who championed us, and to the many more who are making their donations right now, we can't thank you enough. Now, please welcome Chair of the Board for the Community Builders, Louis Mercedes.
Thank you, Stephanie, and a warm welcome to each of you for joining us at Power of Home 2022. My name is Lument Mercedes, and I'm proud to be board chair of the Community Builders. Our vision at TCB is clear: a world with vibrant, safe, and inclusive neighborhoods in which all people live in healthy homes with equitable access to resources and opportunities to pursue their dreams. More than 25,000 people call a TCB community home. As one of America's leading nonprofit organizations, our mission is to build and sustain strong communities where all people can thrive. TCB Community Life unlocks opportunities for residents in the 30 cities where we work. We help new parents access the childcare they need to work. We connect youth to summer programs that keep them on track. We help seniors manage their health and connect with one another. Now, let's hear from a couple of our very special supporters.
Hi everyone, it's May Wu. I'm grateful to the Community Builders for inviting me to be a part of this year's Power of Home event. Thank you TCB Board Chair Louis Mercedes and CEO Bart Mitchell for your leadership in championing the importance of safe, stable, affordable housing for all our residents. For nearly 60 years, the Community Builders have cultivated communities where young people, adults, and families can thrive. Whether by connecting new parents to childcare, ensuring residents have access to nutritious food, or bridging the digital divide for residents in low-income communities, your commitment to centering residents, their needs and experiences in all that you do is inspiring and so necessary. At a time when the housing crisis here in Boston mirrors the broader regional housing crisis and the challenges that cities all across the country are facing, the work you do is critical for us to build stronger, healthier, more vibrant communities. We know that growing housing costs, made worse by a lack of reliable transit options, fuels displacement for families all across Boston. And it presents a serious challenge to employers and organizations looking to recruit and retain talent here in this city. Our mission in Boston is to ensure that the city's growth connects our residents instead of forcing people out, that our communities grow with us through thoughtful, comprehensive planning that creates opportunities by making homes places of comfort, safety, and joy. We want Boston to be a city where people want to live and can afford to stay and build a home. And we're so grateful for all the work that TCB is doing to make that vision a reality. Thank you.
Peace everyone, this is Mayor Brandon Scott. The Community Builders Organization and I share a mission to build and sustain strong communities where all people can thrive. And most importantly, they understand that it takes a village to make that mission a reality. So, I want to thank the entire TCB team and all the residents who call a TCB community home for being connected to such a vital organization. We recognize the importance of housing that connects residents to opportunity, and TCB initiatives are giving residents a fresh start and a key to unlocking the life they deserve. So, On behalf of the residents in the city of Baltimore, thank you for being part of Power of Home 2022 and supporting TCB.
TCB keeps residents at the center of all we do. Residents like Geraldine, a working mom who heard about today's fundraiser for Community Life and wanted to share her story with you. Let's take a look.
My name is Geraldine, and a single mom of 2 boys. Julian was 10, almost 10, and Justin was 2.5. Some of the challenges of being a young mother and a student are just not seeing my kids the way I used to. I have more time to spend with them. And now that I'm in school, it's definitely been an obstacle to find time to be with them, study, and be a mom. Community Life helped me achieve my goal by talking me through it and helping me navigate a plan and what's the next step and how can we achieve that. That's very helpful in trying to pursue my career and make things happen for myself. So that was a big thing for me because I never really had like a mentor in my life, and this definitely helped me, just having somebody to talk to. I graduated with my associates in health and science, and now I'm in nursing school. So they pushed me to go that much further and pursue my dream. Other dreams that I have besides becoming a nurse is buying my house. I will no longer have you guys, but that's okay. You guys help me get to where I need to get in order to pursue my dreams of buying my dream home for my kids and just giving them a different life that I had. I'm grateful for the people who do donate to TCB because they're able to help people like me. My name is Geraldine.
You can help more residents like Geraldine pursue their dreams. Point your cell phone camera to the QR code on your screen and make a donation to TCB Community Life. And thanks to the many of you who are already making your gifts. Now please welcome TCB's President and CEO, Bart Mitchell.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bart Mitchell, CEO of the Community Builders. At TCB, we believe equity starts at home. The quality, affordable homes that we provide are a platform for residents to build their own success with support from TCB Community Life initiatives. It's really an honor to lead a mission-driven organization that develops, finances, and operates residential communities, makes neighborhood strengthening investments, and with your support, carries out amazing community life resident opportunity initiatives. We are able to advance our work thanks to a distinguished board of directors that includes our next speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce the Power of Home 2022 moderator, Carol Galante. Carol is the founder and advisor of the Turner Center for Housing Innovation at UC Berkeley and the Housing Lab, an accelerator program working with early stage ventures on housing affordability. Carol previously served in the Obama administration as Assistant Secretary for Housing and Federal Housing Commissioner in the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, where she was also Deputy Assistant Secretary for Multifamily Housing Programs. Prior to her appointment at HUD, she served for over 10 years as President and CEO of Bridge Housing Corporation. Carol's dedication to equitable housing opportunities for American families is unstoppable. We're so proud of her leadership, service, and profound impact. Joining us from California, please welcome Carol Galante. Carol, it's great to see you again.
Thank you, Bart. Thank you for that warm welcome. And hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be part of this 2022 Power of Home event benefiting TCB's community life initiatives and the thousands of families and seniors who call a TCB community home. And I'm really thrilled to be in conversation today with Julián Castro. Julián served as U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Barack Obama from 2014 to 2017. And before that, he was mayor of his native San Antonio, Texas, the youngest mayor of a top 50 American city at the time. Julián became a household name in 2012 when he gave a very rousing keynote speech at the Democratic National Convention, during which he described the American dream as a relay to be passed from generation to generation. Julián is truly an impactful and thoughtful public servant who has dedicated his career to addressing housing insecurity and ensuring that every family has opportunity. And one quick personal note, I had the privilege of overlapping with Secretary Castro in 2014, working with him as he took over the reins at HUD. And I'll say a few personal notes about him. First of all, he loves his iced tea. He did not, jug down coffee like the rest of us. And he was a quick study with his yellow legal pad in front of him, taking copious notes and asking incredibly insightful questions and commentary. It was just a pleasure to watch him in action. Secretary Castro, welcome to the Power of Home.
Thank you so much, Carol. It's great to be with you.
It's great to
still remember how much I like iced tea. I have some iced tea here with me.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. I have no doubt. I have no doubt.
It's fantastic to be with you. Fantastic to be with Bart and everybody at TCB and the folks who are watching. Thank you all for having me and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, let's dive in. But, first, Secretary Castro, I just feel like we do need to acknowledge the tragic loss of life in San Antonio this week. I know it's on all of our minds, and I know this is a painful time for your city, and we really appreciate you, stepping up and being with us here today. As you know, here at TCB, we love neighborhoods and think that community support is really key to healthy families, and really interested in your personal perspective on that. I mean, you and your brother Joaquin are now household names across the country, but tell us about the family that raised you and, the neighborhood and community that you grew up with.
Yeah, and thanks, Carol, for acknowledging, the tragedy in San Antonio. As you can imagine, it's rocked the community, and we've seen an outpouring of a lot of compassion and concern for the migrants and their families. My brother and I grew up there, of course, in San Antonio on the west side of the city with my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother had come from Mexico herself when she was a child of 6 or 7 years old because her parents had passed away in northern Mexico, and her nearest relatives lived in San Antonio. And so in 1922, 100 years ago, she was brought by those relatives to San Antonio. She raised my mom as a single parent. My mom raised my brother and me as a single parent after my parents split up when we were about 8. And I saw, these two incredibly strong and determined women, very hardworking women, do everything that they could to make sure that my brother and me had more opportunity than they did. The west side of San Antonio traditionally was lower income to some lower middle class housing as well, with schools that were at the center of a 1973 Supreme Court case where parents from those school districts were suing the state of Texas because they said the way that the state was financing schools was giving short shrift to lower income families. And, we grew up in those schools. But in part because we had a family that was absolutely determined to make sure that we could get as good of an education as possible and succeed and reach our dreams, we were able to do that. And just one quick story to give you a sense of my mom. She was a Chicana activist, Mexican-American civil rights activist. On the day that we went to middle school orientation at our public school, in the orientation where the students were there and the parents were there, one of the teachers or administrators that were speaking to us that day said that basically we should look around the room, and they were talking to the students, to look around the room because the chances were that up to 50% of us might not be there when it was time to graduate from the 8th grade. And my mother didn't tell us why at the time, but she that day took us out of that school and put us in another one. And her point was, she said that she wouldn't leave her sons anywhere where they didn't even believe that they could make it to the 9th grade. That's the kind of mom that she was. And my grandmother, in her own way, was much more traditional and didn't have the education that my mom did, but was also very protective and determined to do her best. And what I saw at HUD, and I know that you have seen for many years in your work, was that no matter the economic circumstances of families out there, there is that love and the determination and willingness to make a difference and work hard and do what they can to provide greater opportunity. And the way that I see our work, or the work that you're still doing, fighting the good fight in, is that we need to meet them at least halfway. We need to meet those families at least halfway to make sure that they can make that opportunity real.
Well, thank you for that. Those comments. We just also heard the story of Jerry Lynn and the barriers that she's overcoming. That story must obviously resonate with you in your own life path.
Yeah, it absolutely does, to hear her, where she is now and the confidence that she gives off and feels, and the gratitude that she has to TCB and the path that she's been on. I see not only, my mom, but so many of the people that we grew up around, and a lot of the folks, the families that I had the chance to meet when I was HUD secretary and earlier as mayor, but really as HUD secretary, to travel to different communities and to talk to families who now had housing opportunity, and not just, the four walls and a roof, but everything that also comes with it, where we connect the dots of opportunity for better education, better economic opportunities, and everything else. I think all of that adds up to people being able to reach their dreams. And Geraldine is a good example of that.
Yeah, that's great. Just staying on that topic, today's theme is Power of Home. And I know as former HUD secretary and mayor of San Antonio, what do you think makes housing so powerful and integral to the communities? And are there things you did as mayor and as HUD secretary that, you think reflect that power of home?
Yeah, absolutely. So I, got elected at a young age to city council. And as somebody both running for city council and then serving on the city council, it was, it's what people always say about local government. It's super connected to the people that you represent. I spent, hours and hours and hours talking to people at their doors, hearing their concerns, trying to understand, what the local government could do for them. And then trying to actually do that, whether it was improving access to public libraries or summer programs or creating more affordable housing opportunity. The way that I've always seen this is that all of that is connected. What makes housing so important in that is none of the rest is going to be stable without the stability of a safe, decent, affordable place to live. I mean, we know that a child who has a decent place to live is more likely to do better at school, that an adult is more likely to be able to become employed and stay employed if they have stable housing, that somebody with health issues, whether they're mental health issues or physical health issues, is more likely to have those addressed and also be able to get well if they have stable housing. So, housing is what so much of this revolves around. That's why it's so important, the work that is being done.
Yeah, it's absolutely foundational. If you're moving, your family's moving around constantly, that's just really hard to create that, stability. Totally. You know, we use TCB's community life initiative really as a platform to have residents connect to these various other, whether it's services or opportunities, education, helping increase their earnings, better health, all of that. And I feel like it's really the nonprofit community, government may provide some resources, but, the nonprofit community is really important to those efforts. And I just would like you to reflect on, what you think nonprofits, can and should be doing.
Oh, I mean, they have an indispensable role to play, invaluable role to play in all of this for many different reasons. First of all, I think both of us have had great experiences with nonprofits. I know that you've led them. The people that are drawn to nonprofit work are truly mission driven and go the extra mile oftentimes. We know a lot of times it's not because they're getting paid $1 million a year to do it, but because they have a passion for actually helping people. And they do everything that they can with the resources that they have to make that difference. Also, nonprofits are everywhere and they take different forms, some of them secular, some of them faith-based. They are often more agile, more flexible than government.
That's true.
That's especially true of the federal government. Too oftentimes the federal government lives up to the reputation of having too much red tape and it's so slow to move. Now, when it does move and it does things well, it can be super impactful. But nonprofits help to fill that gap and then also innovate oftentimes in ways that eventually the government takes from in a good way. And then maybe just as importantly, we both know that, for a couple of generations at least now, when it comes to housing and other social services, that the government has not invested, I think, the way that it could or should. And that has meant that so much of that responsibility, has fallen to nonprofits to do and the private sector. And that's why all of us, no matter who you are, no matter where we live, we have an interest in a thriving, effective nonprofit sector. And I saw a lot of them when I was mayor of San Antonio and also, of course, HUD secretary.
Yeah, I really appreciate you also saying that, government, when, well funded, well run, has a very, very important role to play. And I know that you advanced some major priorities when you were at HUD, like choice neighborhoods, which TCB has taken full advantage of, family self-sufficiency in places like Cincinnati, where TCB's use these programs. Are there priorities that you had that you're most proud of accomplishing from your days at HUD, and maybe things that you started but wish had continued better, or you would have had time to continue those efforts?
Yeah, there's so much, and I imagine that you had this feeling too. You feel like you're proud of the work, but also like you run out of time. I got there in the last 2.5 years, and throughout my time in public service, I always focused on what can we do directly to create more opportunity for people, because I got into public service originally with a chip on my shoulder when I went away to college and then law school, of not seeing that many other people from the city, the community of San Antonio that I had come from. And I wanted to go back to the community and do what I could to make sure that more people had the kind of opportunity that my brother Joaquin and I had. And so as mayor, that took a lot of the focus onto educational opportunity. And I tried to bring a lot of that to HUD. One of the things I'm most proud of was Connect Home, that we did in partnership with internet service providers, housing authorities, nonprofits around the country, launching a program to connect families living in public housing to broadband, because we know how important that is in the 21st century. And then secondly, affirmatively furthering fair housing. We know that we can invest in supply all day long, but that we still have challenges when it comes to access and living up to the 1968 Fair Housing Act. And so we need to do both of those things. We need to create more housing supply. We need to make sure that that's accessible to people at different income levels. And then also that no matter what your background is in our country, that we live up to our ideals and are able to get folks into that housing. And getting AFFH finally done, because I know it had been attempted about 20 years earlier in the Clinton administration, and with the work that started under Secretary Donovan and then that we finished, that was very rewarding.
Absolutely, and frankly, rewarding to the whole country that you got that over the finish line. It was not easy, controversial, and frankly, I recall it being used as a political football in the next presidential election, talking about how the Democrats were social engineering neighborhoods. And I just kind of felt like, well, I do remembered very clearly and thinking of, you pushed it through. And so thank you. And now we have an administration and a HUD administration that definitely believes in those goals. HUD continues to be a partner to TCB. And I just want to mention, we're really honored to have a member of current HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge's leadership team here in our audience today, Sarah Brundage, who was a student of mine at UC Berkeley and is now a senior advisor to Secretary Hudge, focused on housing supply. And, so it's coming, I don't want to say full circle, but it's really nice to see that kind of leadership. And I'm just curious, what are some of the innovations you're seeing in the public and private sector emerging now to expand housing stock?
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind right away is some of the innovation that happened during the pandemic. For instance, in California, the increased use of around the country, but I know California, I think, steeped itself in this more than most states, using hotels and similar types of buildings for being able to house people. And, it's not like that was the first time that had ever been done. I remember visiting, I think it was the Roslyn Hotel in LA that had been converted into, I want to say, either a housing for veterans or just housing for folks who had been formerly homeless. But it was done on a grander scale. And I think that legislatively, there was work to make sure that it could be done more quickly.
Absolutely.
Those kinds of things, to me, that's just one example of an innovation I see, and a streamlining that offers the hope of being able to provide more housing more immediately, and to do it in a way where the people who are able to benefit are people who immediately need it, who need it right now. And so I hope, my hope coming out of this pandemic era, if we can say right now that we're out of it, I know it's always weird because we keep hearing about new variants that are coming up, and you almost cross your fingers every time you say that. But to the extent that we're coming out of this pandemic era, I hope what we keep is that sense of creativity and innovation, and willing to use an overused phrase, think outside the box, and to cut through red tape and to get down to the brass tacks of providing housing for people in a way that they need it.
Well, I certainly hope so too. I would say, we've also had some setbacks this past couple of years. I think people had really hoped Build Back Better in terms of more dollars. We've had some successes with the infrastructure bill, but there's been definitely some policy setbacks at the national level, and so. You mentioned nonprofits, but it also seems to me, what can we do as individuals, to kind of double down on making an impact?
Well, I mean, I think there's a range of things that people can do and are doing, from volunteering at not on nonprofits that need that volunteer help because they're often short-staffed, to contributing to those efforts. But also, I think that we have a responsibility in our democracy to highlight and push on this issue more. Let me talk about an issue, just very briefly, that is not this, but, that we've been talking about a lot, which is this issue of guns, right? And what we do if the country is going to enact some sort of common sense gun reforms. It looks like there's bipartisan legislation to make that happen on some issues. But there's a lot of conversation there about, okay, well, what can people do? And at the end of the day, in our democracy, it comes down to making sure that you not only vote, but also that you make this issue a priority when you go to your local city council or county commission, or talk to state legislators or federal legislators. When you go to a candidates forum, if you do, whether it's online or in person these days, and ask questions of people who are running for office and want to represent you, or people who knock on your door or call you on the phone and are asking for your support. The sad thing is, Carol, that housing is a real need for so many people, and we've been in a housing affordability crisis for years now, before the pandemic. But this is never an issue that gets the kind of attention or urgency from most policymakers that it, especially at the federal level, that it absolutely deserves. All of us as individuals have a role to play in helping to change that by making it more of a priority that we speak to and address when we address them.
Thank you. Yes, that is certainly true. I do feel like it's become more of a priority during the pandemic. The pandemic exposed, many already know, but it deeply exposed the inequality and the need for more housing affordability for sure. I can feel the urgency you have, your passion that you have for more public investments. And what are your top priorities? Like, if you were president, for example, what would your top priorities be?
Well, during the campaign, we released a housing plan that was a very ambitious, robust housing plan that called for the creation of 3 million more housing units. I think over the next decade, an investment of resources that we haven't seen in more than a generation in our country. My priority when it comes to housing would be to make sure that we're tackling it from all different angles and using every available tool in the toolbox, from the low-income housing tax credit, which of course has produced so many units, to I think a recommitment to public housing, which we've been sorely missing for a long time, but that if done right can buffer you against these market vicissitudes to some extent. And also all of the good work that organizations like TCB and others are doing to connect the dots of that housing opportunity with other types of opportunity. When I was at HUD, we started working directly with the Health and Human Services Secretary, Sylvia Burwell, on this connection between housing and health. And I know a lot of states have done that, and the federal government to some extent has done that more, but how do we link these things? I think for our country right now, beyond housing, we're in this very weird moment, and in some ways scary moment for our country. And my hope is that we're going to find ways both within our institutions to make changes, to lower the volume and get people to work together better. And then within ourselves, whether it's the polarization that we see through social media or in other ways, we're going to figure out ways where people who come from different neighborhoods, who come from different backgrounds, different income levels, are able to talk to each other better and learn from each other better and respect each other, so that we have a healthier democracy going forward.
Thank you. Really, really powerful. You know, I just want to shift a moment. We heard a little bit at the top of the hour or whatever, whenever it was, from the mayor of Boston, the mayor of Baltimore. Back to your days as mayor, what are the innovations that you see happening at that local level that, you know, maybe the federal government can learn from or other communities can learn from?
Yeah, well, one that I hope other communities take a page from, for instance, is Mayor Wu. One of the first things that she did when she got into office not too long ago was that she put out an executive order on affirmatively furthering fair housing on AFFH. Now, this is not something that you see too often at the local level, but it evidences a real commitment to fair housing, and it really sets the tone for ensuring that the AFFH process and everything that goes along with fair housing is going to be taken seriously in the city. And so Boston, of course, is a city that knows its share of affordable housing challenges, to say the least, over the years. It is not one of these communities that is newer to an affordability crisis. And so there's been a lot of innovation tried there over the years, but I feel like this mayor has brought not only a commitment to do what Boston can do to create more units, but also that commitment to make sure that access and fairness is there. And when I saw that executive order, I thought, wow, that's something that I hope that other mayors will do.
And how do you think, you know, I mean, I mentioned, I think we're seeing more about housing affordability across the country, like more conversation about it. What is it going to take to keep that momentum going from a, you know, narrative standpoint or a media standpoint? Like how do you think about that?
Well, I think that the way that I think about it is that different levels of government and then also non-governmental entities have, especially the media, have a real role to play. The media have to focus on it. It is not the most glamorous issue, right? But there are real powerful stories there worth spotlighting that speak to the need for changes in what we're doing and improvements, investments, commitment. At the governmental level, I think additional creativity, for instance, here in Texas, more cities are running housing bonds. In my city of San Antonio, we just passed the first ever housing bond in our city's history. Communities are doing a lot of things, from housing trusts to partnerships with the private sector. So if all of us continue that commitment to creativity, to innovation, to investing resources at the local, state, and federal level, even though Build Back Better has not passed, right? Perhaps in the years to come, using the reconciliation process, or maybe if there's enough support for some parts of it, just doing it in the budget process. I think we can get pieces of it, perhaps, when it comes to housing done. All of that, and then on the media side, there needs to be more attention that's paid to this issue. We've seen in other countries, right, where it's boiled over to the point where it does dominate a lot of the conversation nationally, but that's increased in the United States, but it hasn't reached that point yet, even though there's so many people who are either hurting because they are homeless, or they're scraping by, they're doubling up, or, you know, a range of things, or even if they're not, they're just super worried. If they're middle class, you know, or even upper middle, just super worried about their housing situation, and they've seen, you know, the rent skyrocket and so forth, or they realize that, you know, that house that they thought they were going to be able to afford 6 months ago, now, you know, the mortgage is going to cost so much more and they can't afford it. It's an issue that the media should be focusing on a lot more.
So speaking of the middle class, or people working to get into the middle class, and rents going up, interest rates going up, what about home ownership? We know there's just a wide divide between home ownership levels for white households, something like 70%, and home ownership for Hispanic and Black families down at 40, 50%. What more should we be doing, whether that's at HUD or at federal level or local level, to really help people take that next step on the ladder, like Geraldine?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, that I don't think in our country that we should be shy about promoting home ownership when it's done right, when it's done responsibly. When I came into HUD, and you remember this, I'm sure clearly, because you were there at FHA, right? Like when we were there in 2014, part of 2015, there was this real reticence to promote home ownership because we had just gone through that housing meltdown. And this narrative had taken hold that the people that were at fault were people that had bitten off more than they could chew. And, this whole, I think, mostly bogus narrative in terms of the real root cause of this had taken hold. So people didn't want to promote it, but there are a lot of values to home ownership. It's not for everybody, for sure, but it does help build wealth. I think it creates stability, both at the individual level and oftentimes in neighborhoods at the local level. And when it comes to Black and brown communities and people of color, we still do have a lot of work to do. FHA is a very powerful tool for that. I would be investing as much as we can in allowing FHA to create more housing opportunity. As you know, by the time the Obama administration ended, over 40% of Black and brown first-time home buyers were able to purchase that home because they had an FHA insured mortgage, where they only had to put down 3.5% instead of putting down 20%. And these were tremendously responsible, great track record home buyers. We need to figure out how we amplify that. And also, of course, the GSEs and others have their role to play in helping to do that. And our other programs, our rural programs, our veterans programs, which have even better terms oftentimes, but intersect with those communities, because we have a lot of Latino and Black veteran families as well. And we also need to continue to put the foot on the gas in terms of fair housing, because a lot of this is access to capital. And some of that, some of that is legitimate. People are not yet in a position to be able to afford, and we need to help them get there. But we also know that some of that is still discriminatory, unfortunately, too oftentimes. And so how do you improve access to capital and other vestiges of a system that made it harder for people of color to actually own a home?
Yes. We have a really negative history in the country, including with the FHA, early in its history. And we're still working to overcome those. I don't want to call them vestiges, because they're still with us, but we definitely are working on that. We're getting close to time, but one question that I have, as someone who worked at HUD and who really cares about the intersection with education and health, and we worked on some of those issues with our, sister and brethren federal agencies at HHS or transportation. It's really hard to break down those silos, so you can kind of have comprehensive solutions. Do you have any thoughts after your time there of, what we could collectively as a country do better to make those connections easier?
Yeah, I think, what seems like a small question to me it's a huge question. And I think coming up, the way that I'll address that for a second and then address it more specifically with what I saw at HUD. The way that we learn, right? To the extent that we learn in an interdisciplinary way, and that we have more of an experience, whether it's in grade school or in higher education and grad school, in interdisciplinary ways, and people are seeing the world that way. We know that we're living it that way. People don't live their lives in these silos of housing or, education or health or jobs and stuff. But we don't often work that way. I think it starts with the way that we think about solving problems. And then it's how we organize ourselves at each of those levels, both in the private, nonprofit, and public sector. In the public sector, it's about having leadership also, whether you're talking about a mayor or a governor or people in the state legislature or in the cabinet or the president, who are committed to that kind of interagency work, who demand it. That's what President Obama did with the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. They set a goal with opening doors, a blueprint for ending homelessness, got these 19 federal agencies, and USICH had been around, I think, since 1987 or something. It wasn't new, but I think the Obama administration and you and Sean and others also were part of this, of breathing new energy and life into it and making it a priority, and everybody moving in the same direction, especially focused on ending veteran homelessness. To me, that was a very powerful example of how agencies can work together at problem solving and maintain of course, their own spheres of what they're doing, their own work, but also overlap a lot more. And I always encourage organizations, when I speak about this, to take a look at that experience. At the federal level, that's one experience. You also have experiences in the private sector and the nonprofit sector, but the one that I saw up close and personal at HUD was USICH. And you can't argue with results. I mean, at the Obama administration, we saw a 47% reduction from 2010 to 2016 in veteran homelessness. There were a lot of people, not only in DC, but throughout the country, that made that happen, including many of the advocates and folks in the audience and TCB and others that do work on this. But it also wouldn't have happened without that kind of coordinated effort and prioritization from USICH.
Yeah, I think that's just a really stellar example. And one thing I think we could do more is, again, I'm back to media or, keeping momentum, is more work on the showing the results, in an ongoing way. And, maybe that's up to groups like us at think tanks and whatnot to, help feed that narrative. I mean, I do feel like we at Turner Center are doing some of that. We're doing a big analysis right now on the Project Home Key that you mentioned that California started.
In California.
Yeah, and to lift up the results and what's working and what tweaks maybe should be made to help them work even better. But kind of keeping these innovative pilots in the spotlight of what it takes to make a difference, particularly in an era where that innovation is just so important. One last question. I saw recently that you are now associated with NAACP, and I'm really curious to get your take on what you're doing with NAACP and what we can expect from you in the future.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about it. In 2022, one of the things I agreed to do was to be a senior research fellow, non-resident senior research, because I'm still hanging out in Texas, in San Antonio, although I'm not there today. I'm in Colorado. But we're focused this year on a number of items, but including fair housing and AFFH and how that's going. I just did a couple of interviews with the folks who went through what they call their housing element, what y'all call your housing element.
Yes.
AFFH is embedded by law into the housing element planning process. So I spoke with Connie Chung, who's one of the assistant directors of planning for LA County, and then Shashi Hanuman, who is now at the Public Interest Law Project, but was at Public Counsel when they went through that process and advocated on behalf of some of the communities in that process, to get a sense of how AFFH is being carried out now, with an eye especially toward how we strike this balance in communities between giving folks the option of moving to higher opportunity areas, but also preserving the ability of people to live in the longstanding neighborhoods that are culturally relevant to them, that they've lived in for a long time, and trying to protect against over gentrification and the displacement that comes with it. A very, very tricky balance to strike. But we focused on that. And then some of the best practices. I did interviews trying to get out, okay, well, during these processes that all of these communities are going to be going through in the future and are going through now, what are some of the best practices for advocates and also for the government that you think people should know about? So stuff like that. We also are going to be doing a webinar within a couple of weeks. It's going to be recorded on July 12th. It'll probably come out at the end of July, that's specifically focused on best practices on gentrification and displacement in terms of, you know, how you address it before it completely overtakes a neighborhood, but also be respectful, you know, and recognizing that you're going to see some change in neighborhoods. I'm looking forward to that conversation, and I'm putting that together right now. So it's basically several projects like that throughout the year that I'm involved in. And it's part of the Thurgood Marshall Institute at NAACP's Legal Defense Fund. So, you know, they've been at it for so long and so great at their work and have been part of such impactful litigation that it's a pleasure to get to work with them.
That is a really exciting effort, and I would love to have a whole nother hour conversation with you about that, because it's something that I feel passionate about, that balance. You know, I'm working with some communities in San Francisco that were, you know, redlined, urban renewal, displaced 20,000 African American residents in the 60s, and it's now, you know, it's 3 blocks from City Hall. This co-op development that was financed under an old HUD program, and you know, the area is now being gentrified. These folks, you know, their place is falling apart, and you know, they want to stay, and the only way they stay is by creating some mixed income, you know, opportunities to cross subsidize what they're doing, and it's like we can't like redline these communities through a use of AFFH, right? We have to, you know, find that both the opportunity to move and the opportunity to stay is a huge challenge, and one I know TCB is, you know, deals with every day in the work that TCB does, because, you know, I hear about it as a board member. So this is really the next level of work that needs to be done, and I'm so happy to hear that you are going to stay deeply engaged in that fair housing effort. So
I'm excited about it. Really about giving people options. You know, I
yes.
think it's about making sure that people have as many options as they can.
Yes, yes. Well, Secretary Castro, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you, and thank you for your time and being part of the Power of Home 2022.
Thank you all so much for having me. And thank you, maybe most importantly, for the work that y'all do every day to make a difference in the lives of so many families like Geraldine's family. Thanks for having me.
Secretary Castro, Carol, thank you both for being part of Power of Home 2022. A special thank you to our sponsors, our board, and the individual donors who have been so generous today. I believe Julie Patterson from our fundraising team has an update. We have raised over $415,000 for Power of Home, and donations are still coming in. I want to thank I want to thank our Power of Home team. You can see all of their names in the chat, the folks who made today possible. And thanks to each of you for making today a success. Be well, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.